Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of Jesse's Occupational Awareness Show, TDCJ War Story Series. Today, we'll talk about some of the events that led up to my eventual resignation from the agency. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Hampton, Virginia. I'm in kind of a F the world mood today. Not really sure why, but that mood will help fuel some of the conversations that we'll have about today's video. So, why did I resign from TDCJ? Well, there were a lot of reasons. The short answer to it, I left so I could go back on active duty. Currently active duty in the Coast Guard, finishing up my career. I'm an instructor at the A School here in Yorktown, Virginia. Excuse me. I'm not even going to bother to edit that. That's one of the things I like about doing it like this. I like the raw, unedited versions of these videos. Some of you may not. Others, there's enough of you that stick around. I guess you enjoy it. So, uncooked, uncut, unedited. The line from WWF Raw back in the days. I used to love that show. So, the short answer as to why I resigned from TDCJ, I went back on active duty. I resigned in April of 2015, and that was when I had gone back on active duty and have been active duty since then. However, there were many unfortunate reasons as to why I'm no longer with that agency, and I've talked about quite a few of them already. So, one in particular that really comes out in mind was the day that I really started to question, can I continue to do this for the next 17 years at that point? I'd been there for 3 years by that time. So let's get into the topic. We had so many rules that we had to follow as COs, and a lot of the rules would contradict themselves, get in the way, and just make it extremely difficult for us to get business done the way that we needed to. If we followed policy all the time, we wouldn't be able to complete the assignments that we were given, i.e., cell searches, moving the offenders to the day room, moving them to the shower. Example, I got to move 84 offenders to the day room and the shower. Sounds easy if they all willingly go. When they put up resistance and opposition, that takes time out of the day. Now, I got to feed chow as well. I got to move the pill nurse around. I got to move the chaplain around. Any little thing that would cause an interruption slowed us down in moving the inmates around. And if it came time to the end of the shift, and if we didn't have all the inmates moved around, didn't matter what it was, didn't matter any of the reasons we had, night shift would complain, we could get a write-up, failure to perform our duties. Didn't matter what the reason was. I pled my case many times, and it really didn't matter. All the supervisor wanted to hear, not Lieutenant Raymond, all the assistant warden over segregation, that Nigerian dude, he didn't care about excuses. He just wanted policy completed. So, there was this one inmate I remember more than any of them. Some of them, I remember their names simply because of how difficult it was to deal with these individuals. Percy Jackson, Tommy Jones. Today, we're going to talk about Little James. Little James, I'll take a step back first. Some offenders would end up in segregation because of the crimes that they had committed, the history that they had with TDCJ. Some were in there temporary. It would be a housing area for general population. If they had committed some kind of an infraction, had a disciplinary, they could get put in seg for a certain time period. Hey, bad, stop doing what you did, and then they move back in population. Others, they were permanently housed in segregation. They weren't going anywhere. Some had been there for extremely long times. It's just how they ended up. Little James was back in there for child molestation. The only reason I know that is because he liked to openly talk about it. Not only would he openly talk about it, he seemed like he was proud of it. And the other inmates, I'm sure they hated him, but they didn't really show that amongst each other when it came to us. For example, two inmates typically, at least when I worked in SEG, I'm trying to explain this as best I can. It was bad for two officers to get into it with each other because then the inmates would get all riled up and know that they had a rift in it. Likewise, the inmates had a code. They would stick together when the officers were around because if it looked like they were bashing heads with each other, then I guess they thought that maybe we were getting a win for that. So they, in our faces, they always tried to stick together. Typically, child molesters were the absolute worst of the worst inside the penitentiary. That's one of the reasons they would be in protected custody, segregation. They typically couldn't be out in general population. They weren't going to last. Something was going to happen to them. Even inmates have certain morals, and child molesters are at the very bottom of the list. This guy, I don't know what he did out in the free world other than child molestation. He was a young dude too. They called him Little James because he was probably about 4'8", 5 foot at the most. I don't know if he had some kind of little growth hormone or took drugs when he was a baby or mama dropped him on his head or he came out feet first, but the dude had some kind of a growth issue, just small, little dude. Nothing intimidating about him in the least bit. If you saw the dude standing in the street and he bowed up to you, I don't think that anyone would be scared of the guy. It looked like you could just thump him. And everybody always says, oh, dynamite comes in small packages. All right, well, you can fucking blow up when I throw you against the wall, you little ass shit. That's my reply to that one. So, Little James, he was back in SEG. He usually bounced between E and F pod, F being the worst. I'm sure there are Texas COs that watch this and probably know this dude by name. Nothing good ever came from this guy's name. Usually he would have some kind of a restriction. Now, they could have day room restrictions, they could have commissary restrictions. They had to go to the shower. No matter what their infraction was, they had to be taken out of the cell and taken to the shower. Depending on how they reacted when it came time to open the door. If they were, we call it silverback gorilla. And if they were being a silverback gorilla, just beating and banging on the door, we'd mark that on the paper and move on from there. You were supposed to come back at some point during the shift, check on them, see if they had calmed down. Did I do that? Yes. Anyway, Little James was always silverback gorilla. And you couldn't open the door without this dude doing something. The first time I pumped his slot, stuck his foot out. What? Usually the hands would come out and you'd snap hand restraints on, take them from there. This dude sticks his foot out. Well, what do? I snap the cuff on his foot. And he goes to yank his foot back in. I wind up on that cuff like I'm sitting back in the seat, ready to reel in a fish offshore. And I yank his leg halfway out the door. My partner bumps me. I let go of the cuff. At this point, it's like a cat that you just slap and it takes off running. He drags his leg back into the cell, taking the cuff with him. I looked at my partner. Said, what's up, man? You can't do that. Can't do that. Look, if they pull, we got to let them go. What? I'm supposed to maintain control of these individuals, and if they pull against me, I got to let them go? I said, yeah. Well, he's got the cuffs now. What are we supposed to do? At that point, my partner had shut the slot, Shoved the bean tool in it. James in his cell, he dancing around, yelling, hollering, ha ha ha. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure you feel real great with a tightened up handcuff on your ankle, but whatever. That was the guy's attitude. So we call the supervisor. Supervisor comes in, tries to talk little James down. Little James won't get talked down. And that was when they would suit up the team. Suit up the team was, well, slang for the five guys that were going to rush in and take care of the offender. Number one guy was the one that would have the big shield made out of plastic. Two and three would usually go for the wrists. Three and four go for the legs. Get the inmate down. Supervisor was supposed to be there, supposed to be an individual with a camera, video, and the whole thing for lawsuit purposes. They'd go in and get control of the inmate. So we went on about our business. They had to suit up the team, run in. James is just yelling and hollering the whole time. Next morning, after turnout, I get called into the lieutenant's office. I get my first write-up for not following proper procedures. Basically, they said when he stuck his foot out, I should have never applied the handcuff. I should have talked the offender down and went from there. So, okay, my bad. It was still fun, though. I had a blast. That was just one time with little James. You didn't have to deal with him every shift because usually each shift we would get assigned different pods, different dorms. In turnout, the supervisor would usually read what had happened either on the night shift or what had happened the shift before or what we could expect from certain inmates. Little James was typically a topic of discussion. If he'd get put in the day room, he'd start climbing the bars. And he'd just hang there and he'd start shaking on the bars and literally making monkey noises. The whole pod would erupt. You have to stop what you're doing, try and talk him down, call the supervisor. Just whatever he could do to disrupt the daily operation, he would do. He thought it was fun. You would think that the other inmates, now they're not getting moved around, their food's probably going to be late. You would think the other inmates would start trying to talk him down and tell him, hey, stop acting the fool, let these guys do their job. Nope. They always turned it around on me. Hey, ho-ass Carter, you ain't moving us around. Oh, y'all saw what little James did. Hey, man, that's you to take care of. They didn't care. Absolutely did not care. Would put it on me, put it on my partner, try to turn it around. We're not doing our jobs. Start filling out I-60s, I snitch that we weren't able to do our job. We were incompetent. That's how some of them would refer to us. All because this dude would just disrupt. Now, he wasn't the only one, but he was the one that came to mind most because he was the most comical. He was the loudest. For being such a little dude, man, he could project his voice. He'd be all the way over on cell 82. You could be in cell 2. Okay? I don't remember how fucking far away it was. It's 50 yards maybe. Something like that. The pods were pretty big. And you could hear the words that this guy was saying. He just had a voice projection that he could get out. If you had to deal with an inmate, if they'd stuck their arm out of the slot, called it jacking the slot, you couldn't slam it. You couldn't slap his hand, get it back in. You're supposed to sit there and talk him through. Hey, what's the problem? Put your arm back in. Call the supervisor. Usually they do it because they wanted to talk to the supervisor about something. Some had legitimate reasons for it. Others, they just wanted to be difficult. When you try to talk with this individual, get his arm back in, there goes little James just yelling. I need to initiate ICS, Incident Command System. That's what we were supposed to put out over the radio if we saw an inmate hanging themselves or starting a fire. That would get the supervisor to respond, get the maintenance supervisor ready if they needed to shut off the water, come with some firefighting equipment. So this dude, he would mock us and just start yelling obscenities. I won't say it here on here. You can use your imagination. Whatever you can imagine, this dude would say. I remember coming on shift one morning, and the day shift while we were off, on our 4 day off period, we would have there was another shift that took over. You had 1-1, 1-2, and then 2-1, 2-2. Those being the night shifts. Usually we would hear about from the other shift. Well, we'd hear from our supervisor what the other shift had been through. And one of the CO5s, these are the individuals that have been there for a minimum at the time of 96 months. They had an extra little patch that they wore under the TDCJ patch on the shirt. These were your more revered COs. They had put their time in. They had been there for a long time. Shout out to you guys for being able to make it to that time. This individual had to fill in. One of the officers had been assaulted and had to go to medical. So this guy took over, was going through SEG, and got into an altercation with little James. Not only did we have day rooms, we also had outside areas where you could put them outside. Now it's surrounded by concrete walls. When you look up to the ceiling, it was covered by a fence. But it was outside. Sun would shine, birds would chirp, it would rain. So it gave them a sense of being outside a little bit. These were some. It also had a basketball hoop, no net, and a ball. Sometimes it'd be flat, but there was some kind of ball out there. Well, I don't know how you've done it. Somehow little James managed to, he wasn't supposed to be out there. He was on cell restriction. The only time I ever moved James was from his cell to the shower, and typically the fight would be on from there. Dude would slip out of our grip. You get the door open and he's ready to just start throwing down with his feet because his hands would be cuffed. There was never a simple time with opening the door, taking this guy somewhere and putting him back in. He always had some kind of infraction. He never got commissary. Like I say, the guy was just off the chain. And I don't know why this CO and his partner took him to the outside rec. These guys would lie to us all the time. Man, I ain't on cell restriction. It says that on the paper. Man, I got off that last week. Classification just don't like me. They would lie all the time. Somehow they manipulated this group, this team of COs, into putting him outside. Somehow, while he was outside, he was able to get up to the basketball goal, hang off of it, and just start acting the fool. Well, CO5, in the process of trying to talk him down, reached up, grabs his foot, pulls him down, slams him on the ground, face all busted up, shoulder jacked up. Now he's got to go to medical. He acted the fool in medical. When the doctor was trying to mess with him, he starts trying to spit at him. Just nothing good about the dude. So he's all busted up. We're sitting in turnout on our Monday morning. It wasn't Monday, but your first day. We called that our Monday. We're sitting in turnout. Lieutenant Raymond says, we need to hold up a little bit. We're waiting on Major to come in and speak with us. There's a female major, white lady. I don't remember her name. I didn't see her all that much. She was filling in for the captain who was the supervisor in SEG. She comes in, and I can't recite her entire speech, but she basically called us COs the most incompetent group of officers that she's ever worked with in her career. She'd been there for about 4 years. How she made major that fast, I don't know. It is what it is. Starts off by pretty much calling all of us incompetent. We're letting the offenders run the area. The inmates are running the asylum. They're manipulating us. They're running game. We're not using the basics of the academy that we were taught. We're supposed to be the supervisors of these individuals. We should be able to handle our business, not always having to call for a supervisor and keeping the radio traffic tied up. And we're sitting there kind of looking at each other like, the fuck is this? Are you talking to us? Or are you, like, is Aunt Flo visiting you this morning? What's going on with this lady? And she tells us, if we're intimidated to put hands on these individuals, then we should really be finding a new career. They were about to shut down the Michael unit, the segregation at the Michael unit, and they were moving all their offenders over to us. And the fight was on all the time in Michael, like it didn't happen in Styles. And that if we were intimidated to put hands on these individuals, we should probably consider new careers. And I raised my hand. Officer, I stood up, but hands class, military guy, kind of respect. Excuse me, Major. So if we put hands on these individuals instead of getting fired, does that mean we're just going to get a room in seg for the day? Because if that's the case, I'm all good with putting hands on them, as long as I know that my job's going to be secured. You can take your seat. You could tell she was pissed. Cool, Major. So we're good with hands on? I'll speak with you at the end of turnout, officer. I sat down. She goes on her rant. Just, I don't know what was wrong with her or where that attitude came from. She turns and leaves. I never did have my meeting with her. As I'm walking out, Lieutenant Raymond, they caught her. Not the best way of going. I get what you're saying. Not the best way to go about it. LT, man, we don't even know who she is. And she's coming off on us, calling us incompetent, that we're not doing our jobs, and then basically suggesting if we're scared to put hands on. We can't go hands on with these guys. You did my write-up when I put the cuffs on little James's foot. He holds his hand up. I know. I understand. I'm not sure where she was coming from with that. This is going to be handled at the supervisor level. Man, this is some bullshit that we're dealing with here. She ain't even supposed to be here, Carter. She's a major. She can pretty much go where she wants to. Well, it'd be good if she'd help us out in here moving the inmates. Carter, move on to your pod. Man, I hadn't even walked in a pod yet, and I'm already pissed off and fired up. This lady just came in here and just basically shit on the whole shift. Why she did it, I don't know. I found out later on she had gotten into it with this CO5. They wrote him up for assault on little James. He said that he was simply trying to prevent the inmate from hurting himself. Did he take him to the ground? Probably. Would I have? No. So, I guess she was dealing with that situation and whatever else was going on. Plus, we were about to receive a lot more SEG inmates. We thought we were full already, and now here we are about to get a large group of them, even more. That day, that was when I started questioning, man, can I really continue to do this for the next 17 years? Plus all the other stuff that had already gone on. That's when I really started to question it. Folks, I know this has been a lot of rambling. I'm probably like a pinball bouncing around a pinball machine. May not make a whole lot of sense. It's just my rants and ravings about what it was like working in the penitentiary. A lot of times it didn't make sense. Man, we did the best that we could. Hope y'all enjoyed this video. Hopefully this day gets a little bit better. We'll see. Y'all take care of yourselves. Appreciate every single one of you. Happy Sunday.